I'm Melissa. I am a recovering addict and alcoholic. My story is somewhat typical as I started with an abusive childhood. Um, I had alcoholism ran in the family. Everybody would drink and party besides my mom. My dad was a raging alcoholic, and I was scared to death of him. By the time I was 8 years old, I had my first taste of alcohol. It's kind of, I guess, a comical story now, but we were all together hanging out because, the family partied every weekend. And we had jello shots. And I spit mine out and announced to everybody I was 8 years old. I said, Jello's rotten. Everybody laughed at me, and I felt like an idiot. And then I realized, oh, it's supposed to taste like this because it's alcohol. Um, by the time I was 10, I got drunk. I would take my dad's beers, um, and actually ended up entering into a house in the neighborhood because, we were troublemakers and ran the neighborhood. But I entered a house and we stole all the beer out of a refrigerator. And I was 10 years old and I loved it. It was liquid courage to me, and it would make me feel like I was a part of whatever was going on with the family. So, um, fast forward a little bit into my childhood. Um, it wasn't very. I don't blame everything. Like that's why I say it's typical. It's common. I understand, and I never once blamed anybody. People did the best that they could at that time. So, fast forward into my teen years, I was very awkward. I was introvert and shy. Um, and at 16 years old, my grandmother was murdered. She was a bartender and she died a very horrific death. And that literally broke the entire family apart. And that was the first time that I ever used alcohol to numb myself, to numb those feelings. Um, so then when I was going through my teen years, drinking, partying, and I had a toxic relationship with alcohol, um, I made my worst decisions, and the most horrible things happened when I was drunk because I didn't know how to drink just one or two. I blacked out every time, every time. Um, but I also found the liquid courage in it. So I liked the effect. I hated the hangover, but I still kept doing it. In my 20s, then I got married, and it was turned out to be an abusive marriage. And I actually did not party during my 20s. I tried to be good, be a good wife, and ended up just falling into the role of caretaker. Um, and I finally, after 8 years, left that marriage, um, got a divorce. So finally, at this time of my divorce, I'm 28 years old. Through my 20s, I was good. Now it's time to take my time back. I felt like I deserved a break. And at the time, a sibling of mine was already in the heroin game. And so, back up a little bit, 10 years before that is the first time I tried it. I didn't really know what it was. I loved it. But then he ended up going to prison. And so I never, could get it again. So now at 28 years old, I'm newly free, and I just wanted to party and enjoy life. And so I started to party with, of course, alcohol again, started making those horrible decisions, drunk driving, allegedly, just all of those things. And I was very selfish. I instantly went from, um, a mom that was trying to do the right thing, going to church, getting beat, to, carefree, and um, ultimately neglecting my kid because of alcohol. I was always addicted and I didn't realize it. So then when heroin came in the picture, it was a 4-day weekend. I didn't have my son. At the time, I think he was 8 years old. Um, and so he was going with his dad for the weekend, and I thought, I can party all weekend long. I can party. So I did. Um, and after that 4-day weekend of partying with Tar, um, I tried to stop because I was going to go to work that next day, and I started throwing up. And I couldn't keep down a teaspoon of water. Like everything was coming back up. So I actually thought, as naive as I was, I thought I was just deathly sick. I went to a local hospital, and they thought it was gastro something. Well, the guy that I started hanging out with, kind of dating, he brought a baggie to the hospital, and he said, "Take this, you'll feel better." I thought he was crazy because no, I'm sick. So I went in the bathroom because I listened to him. I believed him. I went in the bathroom. I did a line. I felt better. That's when I realized I was already hooked. And I just checked myself out of the hospital. I was like, oh, I feel better. I'm okay now. And that began the downward spiral of trying to juggle as a mom, a single mom at the time. I was trying to juggle being a heroin addict and being like the perfect mom that everybody else, that I wanted everybody else to see. Um, and it wasn't long after that that my life began to fall apart because I couldn't juggle all of that. Is at some point in time, like in the beginning, it was all fun. And like what I like to say is, it seemed like the grass was greener and the sky was bluer when I first started getting high. Um, but then it steals your soul because you wake up every day sick. Every day I woke up dope sick. So I would have to get my son ready for school. And at this time, he was able to walk to school. So I pretty much just had to be like, okay, eat your food, but I still had to do those things. And then as soon as he went to school, I was out, chasing the high. And then I'd come back by the time he got home from school. That began where my life began to unravel. Um, I was working midnights, and then to stay up during the midnight, I started doing coke at work to kind of keep myself awake. It doesn't mix. You try to manage things like that, and that's where it's unmanageable. Um, I ended up losing my job, and then I still had my apartment. Was partying hardcore in there. My brother was back out of prison, so he had his family living there too, and then we were having to support the habit. So uh allegedly, we were making buys and selling things like that. And we were in a small little town. So I also ended up at that time kind of getting chased out by the cops. They were constantly watching the house. Um, and I felt like I was always looking over my shoulder, and pretty much waiting for the floor to fall in. Like I was just waiting for it. I knew it was going to happen. The guy that I was dating, he ended up going to prison, and that was a toxic relationship. Um, and it was kind of intertwined with, at this time, the heroin. I was like bonded to him through trauma and dope. Um, so when he went to prison, I tried to then at that point get my life back together. Um, Ended up going to methadone clinic. I was going every day. Honestly, that was the highest I ever was in my life, was when I was going to the methadone clinic, because I was coached and told, make sure you let them know that what they're giving you is not enough. So I tried to get the highest dose I could, and I'd be nodding out, driving out of the parking lot. It was awful now when I look at it. Um, and it was 45-minute drive there. So every morning soon as they open up, which is I think 4:30, I was out on the road going to get dosed, and then that usually lasted all day. But I was also partying with, crack at the time. And then I'd have to come back down and, do dope on top of the methadone. So it was really chaotic. Um, and I had no control. So by that time, the boyfriend of mine, he was, I think he was serving like 9 months. I started to party and go out to the bars, blacking out every time, and, doing this secret life of still doing dope. And honestly, at that time when I was partying, I tried to manage my doses. And so at least I wasn't like nodding out during the day, because I didn't want my mom to see, she was already hip now to what it looked like to be on dope because of my brother. So um, I couldn't get away with all of those things. Uh, I kind of went back and forth between the methadone and trying to, keep myself from going dope sick. I also started doctor shopping, ended up getting blacklisted because it caught up with me. Um, and then at that point, the boyfriend came out of prison. We were back out on the road. And then I found myself pregnant. When I got pregnant, I knew I was not going to be on dope, with this baby. Um, but I was addicted. So I actually went to a Suboxone doctor, or Subutex, and just tried to just do that. So during the pregnancy, I was on the Subutex. Towards the end of the pregnancy, I think I was like 6 months. I didn't want to be on that anymore because I know as a mom, if you have a child that's born with any substance in their system, then Children's Services is going to be the next call from the nurse. So I, against the doctor's wishes, started to wean myself. Is the doctors, honestly, I mean, in my opinion, the doctors that I went to, they didn't want me to get off because I was paying cash. They didn't, they weren't gonna tell me no. So he tried to tell me no, I shouldn't do that. But I did it anyway, and I weaned down myself. And then so by the last 2 months of my pregnancy, I was completely clean. The boyfriend, well, the who I was pregnant by. Of course, I was the only one that had a driver's license. Always seemed to be that way, and the only one that had a car. So I was the driver. So I was constantly, I looked like I was innocent because I'm pregnant. And so, I was able to go into stores and do exchanges and returns and be the driver and just look innocent, try to look innocent during all these things. Like I would be able to get um, the utensils that I used to shoot up because, I was able to say, well, I'm pregnant, so I have gestational diabetes and I need, certain things from the pharmacy. That's what I did. That was like my job. So after I had my baby girl, which was amazing blessing, and during this time, my child that was the oldest one, went to go live with his dad. And I fought against it, but at the same time, I was so deep in my addiction, I didn't want him to see, the ugly part of it. So I let him go with his dad, and he was 10 years old. Um, and I still regret that to this day. I really do. But when I had my daughter, I thought that this was my second chance, and I was just looking at her when we were in the hospital, and I was just so in love with her. Like I was so happy. And then the baby daddy was actually in the bathroom getting high, like the whole time. He was, and it was, yeah, it was just ridiculous. He was like thinking that the nurses that came in to check on us was like coming to get him. Um, So that was another part of the chaos that I had to deal with. And for a few months, I was able to, stay clean. and not do anything. But the heroin around me and the crack, I was just like, I'm being a good mom. I'm being good. I'm taking care of her. Um, so I want to say around the time that she was probably 6 months, maybe 5 months, I went back into it. Because I still held on to my toxic relationship, and I wouldn't let him go. So that took me back into a relapse. And I fell hard, fast. I want to say I got addicted that very first shot, when I came back. And at this point in time, I was using it intravenously. So this spiraled on for another couple years. I ended up having children's services got into the picture because somebody made a wrong turn while I was in the car with them, and we had our babies with us. So even though I was always very careful to not have like any of my kids around it or have things around, um, it still caught up with me. You can't play the game, of addiction without getting bit like that. So children's services got involved because we were in the car and things were found in the car. That wasn't ours, but still, we were in there. Um, and I had a warrant, so they still took me to jail for that. And I was afraid to pee in a cup for that for the children's services when they showed up at the house. So that started now the running game. So I had a probation officer I was running from. I was not doing anything I was supposed to do for probation, which was like simple stuff like volunteer at the Humane Society. I couldn't do it because I was too busy chasing the high. Um, and then hiding all day long during the day hours from children's services, cops, and the probation officer. That's exhausting. That is absolutely exhausting. And doing it with a baby that's about to be 1 year old. I don't know how I did it. Um, Even just thinking about it just makes my stomach sick to my stomach that I was like that. But that's the mentality, when you're stuck in addiction, that's that mentality. Um, During this time, ended up moving to a bigger city, and actually the dope man had a trap house, and he said, "Hey, you guys can come up and just take care of my house. Just make it look like somebody's staying here." Um, but it was a trap house. There was no utilities. There was no running water. It was ridiculous, and it was in the ghetto. And we were the only white people in this whole neighborhood, so they all knew, what we were doing there. And I had my baby with me the whole time. Sorry. A lot of bad things could have happened. But I wasn't thinking that way. I was like, now at least we'll get free dope every morning. It was delivered to us because we're here taking care of customers that were coming in during the day. They had somewhere to go. There were mothballs all over the floor because people were smoking crack in there. And I tried to hide my baby in a closet, like when people would come over. And I thought in my head that that was me being a responsible mom. Um, Ended up we finally left because we were there for about 3 months, and it pretty much felt like we were homeless because, we had no food, we had no running water, like we had to walk everywhere to get anything to eat, and use tea light candles to warm up vegetable soup, like in the can. We would use tea light candles to warm it up to eat. And then, always hiding from the cops because the boys in blue would be coming down the road, and we'd have to let people know that they're coming and shut everything down, make the house look like it was vacant. And what was the final straw was the neighbor was a lady. She was, smoke crack, and that was like what she did. She actually told me that she had me come over to her house, which I'd been to her house before. It was like right next door. Um but when she got me in there, she started saying that the guy down the block, it's his birthday, and that he wanted some girl for his birthday. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, well, he wants the white girl for his birthday. And I realized that she was setting me up and she was trying to sell me for crack. And my heart started racing. I had my daughter in my arms and I, clenched her tight and I realized, oh my God, I'm, she's trying to sell me to the guy down the street. And then she said that, I'm like, no, I'm not into that. We'll go figure out how to come up with the money to buy it. Like I was like trying to reason with her. No, she had already gotten paid. So she was high as a kite and was not going to let me out of her house. So I ended up taking her and, walking into the kitchen. She had her back door all boarded up and it was like nailed. And so the only entrance and out, exit was the front door I walked in. And she kept trying to block me. And the whole time I'm thinking, yeah, that's a good idea. Like, man, I'm not going to tell her I'm not going to do it. So I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. I just need to, to take her over to her daddy and stuff like that. I was so scared. My heart's pounding right now, just taking myself back to that place. But my heart was jumping out of my chest. And and I know like in my spirit I was like, God, please get me out of this. I know I did this to myself, just get me out of here. And then finally I just had an idea, like I was like, oh my God, that dude's like, what's that guy doing in your backyard? She turned her head for a split second and I ran out that door, ran right back into the trap house. And I told the baby daddy at the time, I said, let's go now, call your dad, we are leaving now. And I told him what happened. Adrenaline's still running. I was freaked out. Now this person, this was past living in a trap house and get busted with drugs. This was like human trafficking crap. I'm not going to be a part of that. Um, so that was the story about the trap house. Went back, and you would think that that would be enough to wake me up, and it didn't. I still stayed, in my addiction for a couple more years. Children's Services had me go to a treatment center. I finally peed in a cup and it came back and I lit up the board. So um, luckily I did not lose custody of my daughter at that time, but I went to treatment for the first time in my life. And in treatment I realized a lot of things, but I never did step one. I was not ready to say that I was completely done getting high, and I was not, like, I couldn't even say the words that I'll never drink again. That was unfathomable to me. Um, so I learned a lot of things, and I felt like now I know how not to get addicted. And that's kind of was my mindset. I didn't allow the treatment to travel from my head to my heart. Um, and I honestly mentally relapsed while I was still in treatment. Um, so that was pretty quick, got out and was back at it because I did not get rid of that toxic relationship that I was in. I went right back to him and I tried to be good for a little bit and it didn't happen. Like the drugs were still around. I was still going to do them. So here went more time um being in the addiction. Now I find out that, and Children's Services was still keeping up with me. Okay. Then I find out that I'm pregnant again. And this was a shocker. I actually found out because I went to a detox. Because I went right back at it. Like I said, after treatment, I was addicted to heroin again. And Children's Services was still keeping tabs, like they weren't closing the case yet. Um, And I'm sure my caseworker saw the signs, but so I just, at the time I was like, oh, they're just taking so long, they need to close the case. I'm fine. So I went up to detox at a like a rapid detox over the weekend type thing. And the lady told me that they couldn't take me because I was pregnant. I flipped out. It was horrible. Children's Services found out, and at this point, when they found out that I was still addicted, and back at it, that they said that at that time my baby we had to leave the house. So, because we were all living together in the grandparents' house. So the grandparents took my daughter, and at that time she's, a toddler. And that's when, spent a little time pretty much being homeless because we had nowhere to go. So we went back up, to the bigger city and walked around and spent some time just walking the streets. And then when I had went to that detox and was told that, because I kept thinking, you put it off. Like if it's a Monday, you're not gonna get clean because it's Monday. So I was always using those excuses, coming up with them. And when I finally wanted to get clean, they tell me I'm pregnant. They can't take me. I was so scared to tell anybody because I knew Children's Services was going to be like, okay, open case, we're going to keep this open now until you have this baby. And that's pretty much what happened. I went back into, um, treatment and I just wasn't able to, I wasn't able to change my people, places, and things. I wasn't giving up my toxic relationship with the baby daddy because I felt like I needed to be loyal to him. He's been taking care of me and my addiction and our habit for so long. Um, so went through treatment and I went to sober living, ended up relapsing in sober living because I felt like I couldn't do all the things. And this is when my baby was born and I was there by myself. There was other women there, but there was no family around. And I just really didn't have the energy. Like I had to, do part-time work to stay at this place. And I didn't have the energy to do it. I was so tired. So I thought if I could just use some things that the other girls in the sober living were using, and it wasn't heroin, it gave me energy. So I started doing that. Well, ended up getting kicked out of sober living. And I literally ran out actually with both my kids because they wanted me to pee in a cup and I was not about to do that. So I finagled a way to get back into the house. I grabbed my kids and we ran out the door. Went to a friend's house who really wasn't a friend, but an acquaintance house and stayed there. And now I was back to running and hiding from Children's Services, hiding from, just in case the cops come now. Um, and it just, man, it's just such a just recantering it. It's just such a downward spiral. Like my life was not getting any better. This whole time I was running from God and I was, just completely hopeless and helpless. I ended up, hiding out in Children's Services. It was so long I hid that Children's Services in that county, because it was a different county from what I had been in, they ended up just giving up, stopped looking for me because they could never even track me down to even know my name. I mean, to get any information about me. So somehow I got out of that one and I thought, whew, good, right? Got myself an apartment in this new town, and the apartment was, man, I didn't have to go anywhere for the drugs. They were all around. And I thought this was the best thing ever. Um it's crazy. Now I would not even walk through there in the daytime. You know what I mean? But in that time I was like, yeah, it's awesome. We got somebody dealing guns across the street and dude's house got kicked in a couple of days ago. Like this place is going to be great. Um During this time, I was still trying to act like I was okay. So for my family, they all knew if I fell off the face of the earth, it was because I was back running and doing drugs. Because I never wanted to tell my family. I never wanted to lie to my mom and my grandma. So in my head, I thought, well, if I just stay away, I never have to answer those hard questions. I'll never have to lie to them, face to face. So I hurt them in that aspect, but in my head, I thought that I was doing a favor, kind of. Because I lived and where we lived, it was like 2 hours, I think, from my family. So it wasn't like anybody could just stop on by. Um, and in this place, this is where I got the lowest I ever have in my life. Um, we were able to get high every day, somehow come up with money. We had a car, I had a driver's license, but I rode a bike everywhere, and that's because traded the traded the car to the dope man and let him do what he had to do so we could get free dope every day. Sewed my food stamps, so I'd have to go steal food for the kids, which I did. Stole diapers, wipes, all of those things that a good mom should provide. I provided them, but it's because I took them. Went to every single pantry on the bike. It doesn't matter if it was snowing, raining. I rode that bike where I had to. Um, and then I was also the one that had to go grab, the drugs because the baby daddy would stay in bed, dope sick, until I brought them home to get us right. So I think it turning into that part took me to my lowest. It just took me to my lowest. When I'd wake up in the morning, I was instantly dope sick. I hated seeing the sun. I hated waking up. Um, and then I had to provide for my kids. I had two little kids, and I'd be dry heaving in the sink, making their breakfast. Um, at one point in time, ended up losing electric. My electric got cut off. My the heat got cut off, and the water, all in the same summer. Like during 3 to 4 months, they all got cut off. So I was constantly like I would walk to the creek was behind our house and fill the bucket up with water so we could flush the toilet. Um, I would steal the electricity with an extension cord from the girl next door when she went to work. I was using her electricity to, run our microwave and to get hot water. And it was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. Um, I finally got so low that I realized that I had to reach out, and it wasn't to a person. Um, I hit my knees in my kitchen and I said, Jesus, help me. Um, 2 days later, 2 days, that's it. I get a knock on the door, and it's children's services from that county. And here's someone that had talked to me. They could tell that I sounded really low, I think, on the phone, even though I didn't admit anything. So they actually, I found out later on that they were the ones that made an anonymous phone call to children's services. But so they came to my door, and you know what? I was actually relieved for the first time. I still didn't like children's services, but I was relieved, like, finally something might happen. This might be me turning the corner. So during that weekend, after they showed up, I peed in the cup, and I knew it was gonna light up the board, by Monday. It was a Friday, so I knew I had that weekend. I had to figure out where my kids are gonna go, you know. So the family members could take my daughter, but my youngest had disabilities, and nobody could take him. So that became my obstacle. And honestly, that was an obstacle for a long time, was who's going to take the kids, as a mom in addiction, that is major and still there. I still help people daily trying to get through these obstacles. But so I was faced with that. And since nobody in the family would take him, um, I had to sign temporary custody over to Children's Services so I could go to Detox. Okay, so I was ready to go. The boyfriend, the baby daddy, is still in the picture. He's still living there, but he's refusing to cooperate with Children's Services. He ain't peeing in no cup, that kind of thing. Um, which I wouldn't have expected anymore, honestly. So I go to do a rapid detox. I think, okay, I can take the weekend. I can do a rapid detox. I'll get my kids back on Monday. That's not how it happened. So I went to another town. Actually, Children's Services, my caseworker took me to another city, and we did the rapid detox there. And I was still withdrawing when I checked out. I was not ready to check out, but I felt obligated. I'm the mom. I got over the hump, right? I got Suboxone to get over the hump of the withdrawals from heroin, but I was still sweating. I was still feeling all these withdrawals. And the biggest thing is that mental obsession. It was so strong. It was so strong. So when I got out, I was trying to drink vodka. I was trying to take Tylenol PMs, anything I could to get like out of my own head. Um, it was just, it was a crazy period. I went back to the ghetto where I lived. And my daughter was with the grandparents still. She was safe, but I was, I had to get my son back. So then I had to do like these IOP classes. Well, you got to pee, you got to do drug tests, IOP classes. I think it was maybe the second day I was home. Dope dealer came to the door for the boyfriend that was still living there, and I ended up getting high with him. Uh, I want to say it was maybe a week. And you know what? Without the kids, I was worse. I was like, I had no purpose. And at the time, like, I said that prayer. I didn't realize that this was God moving things. I thought that my life was just crap and that, this is where it had come to. Um, So, and I even had it's crazy. It's not like a dope man is, that nice, but I even had some of them ask me like, why aren't you getting your kids back, as they're delivering the dope? It just, but because it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense, but it was that mental hold. Like I didn't address it. Um, and So it was maybe 5 days, 6 days into this. I was still going to like their class, waiting to go, like I was going to go back into treatment, but I was still going to their class. I kept avoiding the drug test. So as soon as the caseworker would say, okay, everybody, come in, time to drop, I would suddenly get a ride from somebody else really quick and get out of there. So I did it twice and they caught on to it. And they had said, okay, next time you come in, you're going to do a drop. So I knew, great, here I go again, because I'm going to light up the board again. And I just did my detox and I should be cured, right? I was not. So what happened, remember I had said that the car was being used by the dope man? Well, we get a phone call, a frantic phone call from him, and he's like, "Hey, man, you gotta come pick up your car. It's at Lowe's parking lot." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I left it there. The keys are out there." I said, "What the heck is going on?" I get a call from the police station, and they said, "We need someone that has a driver's license to come and get this car. It's been reported as um it was like left in Lowe's, so it was reported as something, but it wasn't stolen." um, like abandoned or something. So I get on the bike and I'm already dope sick and I'm freaking out. Like, of course, I'm the only one with the license. I have to go get this car. Soon as I get to the car, I put the bike down, the windows are down, and the car's like sitting off. So it's not like next to other cars in Lowe's. And it's a regular day, so there's people shopping. And I get in the car and then I try to call the dope man, like, where are the keys? You said the keys are here. And he said, "Hey, you better watch out. The boys are coming." Oh my God. As soon as I get out of the car, I'm surrounded by DEA, by police in vests with their guns drawn, yelling at me, telling me to get out of the car slowly. I was shaking. I was so scared. I was so scared. Like, what just happened? So I got taken in here to come find out dudes that we were letting use the car, they were actually wanted for a drive-by. So the detectives were like, and I didn't say anything to them, like I didn't really know the guy's name. I didn't know where he lived. Um, and the detectives thought I was lying. I was just no, I was just that I'd rather not know. I was like, playing the naive part. Um, but like the one had said, we don't care about the drugs. We don't care about the crack. We don't care about that. He's like, these guys are wanted, we're looking at them for murder. Um, and my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe it. So these guys that, I was letting come to my house, they were cooking in the kitchen, they were using the car. They're suspects for murder. And I thought they were stand-up guys, right? Um, so I actually got released. I got charged because they said I was withholding information. Um, And I walked back to the apartment complex I was at. And, when I got there, I got right. And I kept my charge in the back of my pocket because I'm walking back into the ghetto and I need proof that I did not tell. Like these guys will kill me. I already know it. Um, so that next morning, the bus that came by to pick us up for the IOP class, the one class I said I was doing, avoiding the drug test. I get there and a caseworker came to the door and she said, "There's an open bed if anybody wants it." And my hand flew up so fast. I got the open bed, and this time I finally realized I had to sit down. I'm like, I need to sit down and just stop. Just stop. Stop trying to hold all these things in. And that was the first time. And I finally submitted to God. And I knew right then and there, like, me praying, a few weeks before that was God really was answering. And I just needed to stop trying to control it and manage it myself. Um, so I went through treatment, and you know what? It was the same treatment center I had already been to. So this time it worked because I let it go from my head to my heart. And I know it's because Jesus like really met me there. And I fully did step one. I fully admitted that, my addiction was bigger than me and it was unmanageable and I could never drink again. And I didn't ever want to drink again. So that mental obsession, God took it from me because all those years, all those decades from the time I was a teenager, I've always had the mental pull of, being in the bar and drinking and partying. I've always had that mental pull. Um, and it was God is who delivered me from that. So I'm so blessed to say that I now have 8.5 years sobriety, completely clean. I don't use anything. I don't even like taking certain medicines because if it makes me woozy. But it's not because, I'm of any, it's not coming from like a self-righteous place. It is just, I'm truly grateful, that I could have been a statistic. And my children could have been children without a mom and visiting me in a cemetery. So that day was August 11th, 2016, when I went into treatment for the last time and so very thankful today. And I work the steps. I really believe in giving back what was so freely given to me. And that is my mission for the rest of my life.